Hello, Oasis. Hey. Man, how y'all doing? It is cold outside. Oh my goodness. But hey, I learned something new this past week. I learned that there's this thing that happens in China. There's a river, and somehow the way the earth is constructed with the moon, I don't understand the scientific terms for this, but the way that the earth is just constantly spinning, and then the way that the moon then spins around the earth actually impacts tides, and it can impact tidal patterns. And I actually found this video of what is called a tidal bore. You see, what happens in this river in China, the way that it's constructed is that multiple tides end up hitting together, and then they end up coming straight to this dam. And so then the water hits the dam, and it bounces back, and it gets flowed in with another tide, and it bounces back, and it keeps coming back, and it keeps coming back, and it's growing, and it's growing, and it's growing, and there's these people taking photos, and it looks really great. But then you start to see them take their kids away from it because now those waves are pretty huge. And then there's that one lady that's still trying to get a photo, but like the water's literally crossing the dam and she really wants a photo. And so she gets one and then she's running away. And so this is called a tidal bore. This happens twice a day, every single day in China. You can look at the pattern of the moon. You can look at what season that you're in because of how the earth is tilted on its axis to figure out at what time this is going to happen each and every single day. There are signs posted all across this river to remind people how dangerous this is because these waves can actually get up to 30 feet tall. Yeah, that's not great. You can actually, there's actually been people that have died from watching this because you saw that really nice short metal chain fence. That's not going to help you against a 30-foot wave. You can get pulled into the tide, you can get pulled into a rip current that is going 8 different directions, yet people will say they didn't know what was going on. They'll say, well, I didn't see it. And they're like, how did you not see it? You could literally look across and see this gigantic wave about to come in. How'd you not see it? It was rumbling right there, right before your very eyes, but you were too busy taking a photo. You see, tonight we are talking about our mental and our emotional health. We're continuing our series. We're looking at just the places in our lives that God is redeeming and God is restoring. And we've been looking at Pete Scazzero's model of holistic health. And tonight we're hitting on emotional and mental health. And I think a lot of us, we miss the signs and symptoms that there's something wrong. Jonathan Haidt, he's been an author, and he's actually been profiting off of the fact that we are known for the generation with the worst mental health in the history of anybody ever created, and this isn't new to us. He's a psychologist, and he wrote this book, and do you know what he titled the book? He named it after us. He called us the anxious generation. And we hear that, and we have a 300-page book that has all of the stats and records of why we are just mentally messed up, and we're okay with it. It's not new to us. Honestly, for our culture, for our generation, it's weird if you don't have an anxiety problem. It's weird if you don't have issues with depression. We are so callous to it. It's not new to us. And the problem is that it's not that we're uneducated. It's not that we need more stats. The problem is that we honestly don't believe it's possible to be healed emotionally. We do not believe that mental and emotional healing is possible. And there has been industries that have been profiting off of our own mental health struggles. And there have been really, really good things that come out of this. I say this as someone who has been seeing a therapist for 3 years. There have been really, really great things that have come out of the advancements of science and medicine and technology. But the problem is that we've been using coping mechanisms as a whole healing, and it's not working. We've been trying to use our therapists and our medications in order to fully redeem what's going on in our mind, and we are now tired and frustrated because it's not working. And so then when it doesn't work, we turn to other things, whether healthy or unhealthy. We try and eat better because we know that when we eat better, our brain feels better. We try and go outside and get some vitamin D because we know that vitamin D is supposed to help us with our serotonin levels. We get a serotonin lamp or like a Himalayan salt lamp. We get all of these things for our house to make us feel better inside. We distract ourselves and try and climb a corporate ladder. We try and find our success and our worthiness and our satisfaction and how much money is in a bank account. And we're trying to fill ourselves with all these things, but really we're just numbing ourselves to the reality that there is something we can't heal. And nothing here on this earth can heal it. You can't fix it with your therapist. You can't fix it with your medication. Those things help. Please hear me. They help. They help with the symptoms that you are feeling. They do not provide whole healing. And there's an author, her name is Jenny Allen, and she says that the greatest spiritual battle we face right now is right between our ears. The greatest spiritual battle we face right now is the fact that we don't believe that our mind can be healed. Our mind is a battleground. It is facing the flaming arrows of the evil one attacking us day in and day out with limiting thoughts, false narratives, and accusations against our identity. Our mind is a battlefield, and we are consistently losing and trying to cover up with like drinking more water. We think that's gonna help. We think that's gonna heal us. But I wanna offer this invitation for us tonight. What if we didn't have to settle for emotional management? Man, what if we could be healed? What if we didn't have to wake up day after day trying to cover up the symptoms that we're feeling? What if we could actually be healed? And so if you have your Bible, I invite you to turn to Luke 10. And we're gonna read a story of God's healing. Like, we're gonna start that out tonight. We're reading a story of God's healing, okay? Healing is coming. Healing is in this room. And as you turn to Luke 10, we're gonna find that there's this lady named Martha, and she's invited Jesus to her house. But I need to set this up a little bit. Martha has 2 siblings. And this trio is known for being some of Jesus' closest friends and companions in his ministry. His siblings are Martha, Mary, and Lazarus. You might know Lazarus as a guy that Jesus resurrected from the grave. This trio of siblings, they fully believe that Jesus is the Messiah. But read with me what happens at this meal. In verse 38, we see as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said, but Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. So Martha invites Jesus. Martha invites one person, and his name is Jesus, over to her house, but it's really likely that more than one person showed up. You see, Jesus traveled with an entourage. He had the 12 disciples. They went everywhere with him. Then there were usually some other women that traveled with Jesus. They would fund his various ministries. And then there's this group called the 72. These were disciples that Jesus had sent out to go ahead and do ministry. But in reality, there's at least 15 people showing up to Martha's house, and she's only invited one. We could also make a really great claim that there's about 70 people showing up to Martha's house. And how many people did she invite? Jesus. Whoa. Martha does not have a deep freezer. There is no leftover casserole in her house. Martha, she does not have DoorDash. She can't just call someone to go deliver food. There are no pizzas. There is no Little Caesars hot and ready $5, we can get this right now. No, Martha invites one person over to her house, and she is feeding a whole entire village. And then on top of that, she's actually going to be graded on how well she feeds this village, because Martha is culturally expected to perform and to host. And if she doesn't measure up to arbitrary expectations, then that's going to be told to the entire culture she's in. She will be socially shamed as someone who's not generous enough, someone who is not kind enough, someone who is not capable enough to do what she's doing. So there are 70 people showing up to Martha's house, and she's now got to go bake. She's got to go make some bread. She's got to go find an animal so that way they can have pulled pork or something. She's literally trying to make your Super Bowl party happen for 70 people, and she's only got the power of herself. And so now she's running around. She's trying to refill everybody's drinks. And they are all looking at her, watching at her, and she can see that they are grading her on what she's doing. They're saying, is Martha going to live up to the expectation? I imagine Martha's running around her house like a chicken with its head cut off, trying to figure out what to do. And I think we can relate so deeply to what Martha experiences. No, we don't cater for 70 people usually, but we experience the weight, the crushing weight of societal and cultural expectations that we cannot manage. Expectations that there would never be a reason for us to even reach. Think about it. It actually started for you probably in high school. You were told that you needed to take the SAT and ACT, and that you needed to get really good grades, because if you got good grades, then you could get into a college, and then you could get into a college of your choice. And if you got good enough scores on your SAT and ACT, your parents wouldn't have to pay as much, and you wouldn't have to take out loans. Have you heard about the student loan debt crisis? Not great. So then you end up going to college, and you're like, oh my goodness, I got these scholarships, but now I actually have to keep them. I have to maintain my grade point average. and my classes are hard. Like they're not easy. And so like, I gotta do all this homework, but then your parents are like, oh my goodness, you need a job. How are you gonna eat? And you gotta pay rent. And so now you're trying to balance work and a job, and your boss tells you at your job that it's okay. Like, you're a student first, we totally get it. Like, if you need a day off to go study for an exam, like, we totally get it. But then you try and ask for a day off, and you see the way he looks at you, he is not happy with that. And so now you're trying to manage your job and your work, and it just feels like a lot. But then you're also told that college is the best 4 years of your life. Go make friends. And you're like, with what time? Like I gotta do my homework. My grades are failing. I gotta show up to work. Like, I don't want my boss to get mad at me because I could get a really, really great internship over here, but I also need friends, and now I'm lonely and sad, and I don't have anything fun to do. And so then you go and you spend all your time trying to make friends. Wait, you can't afford to buy a house right now? Didn't you work? Didn't you go to college? Didn't you get a really great job after graduating? You're like, no, I was trying to study and I was trying to make friends because you told me to. Wait, you're still single? Oh my goodness, you left college without a significant other? And you're like, I was trying to work and I was trying to pay off my debt. And you're like, man, yeah, we expected more from you. Like we experienced this. And like, you see how people talk about it, they make it seem like it's okay, but when they look at you and when you live differently and when you don't reach this arbitrary expectation, you realize that you're trying to meet something that you could never reach in the first place. This is what's happening in Martha. She's being crushed by these unrealistic expectations that she could never meet in the first place, and it starts to build in her. Like that tidal bore, like those emotions didn't just go away. They were building. And then at some point, they start spilling out. And they start to hurt other people. Martha, her emotions are spilling out, and she's now going to say something that's actually very verbally aggressive. In our next verse, she says, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Martha is verbally aggressive towards her sister Mary. She's actually like tattletaling on Jesus. Think about all the things, like if you got to be alone with Jesus, you got to tell Jesus one thing. You'd be like, Jesus, my sister is not helping. Like, what? It's spilling out of her like a boiling pot of water. Like that's been left alone. It's just spilling. The expectations, the weight, the tiredness of performing has just been simmering unnoticed in Martha. But let's look at how Jesus responds to this. He says, Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. Within just 2 verses, Jesus provides complete and whole healing to Martha's worry. In just 2 verses, Jesus does this, and we're going to break this down a little bit. The first thing we need to see here is Jesus sees Martha as a person, not a problem to be fixed. Jesus uses her name. He says, Martha, Martha. He does not say, anxiety, anxiety, depression, depression, PTSD, PTSD, bipolar, bipolar. He doesn't say that. He says Martha, Martha, because Martha is not her diagnosis. Martha is not her experience. Martha is a person. People are restored, problems are fixed, and Martha is a person. And this is a gentle and delicate calling to ground Martha. And the most important thing, guys, Jesus didn't care about the party. He didn't care about if the food came out on time. He's not concerned with the meal. He's not concerned if he has enough water to drink right now. Jesus is concerned about Martha. He is concerned about a person who is in emotional distress. And by speaking her name, Jesus is declaring that Martha is not some manufacturing defect that needs to be fixed on the assembly line. Martha's a person who's going to be restored. When Jesus sees you and he calls you by your name, not your experience. Your name is not your diagnosis. Your name is not your mistake. Your name is not what's been done to you or what you've done to someone else. Your name is not something that you're still waiting on. Your name is a child of God. That is your name, and you answer to nothing else. You are a child of God. You are strong, and you are worthy, and you are beautiful, and you are brilliant, not because of what you can produce, not because you proved it, but because you are God's child, and nothing can separate you from that. Jesus, when he calls us by name, reminds us that we are people first. We are people, and when Jesus sees us experience emotions that are bubbling over, he doesn't fix us because we need to be fixed. He restores us because we're created for something more. The second thing that Jesus does is that he helps Martha identify her lack of emotional health. Jesus gives language to what Martha is feeling. Martha is feeling anxious. The word Luke uses is called merimnao. I hope I said that right. Merimnao. And it literally means anxious. It means pulled in multiple different directions. So imagine Martha in her house. She's trying to host in the living room, trying to make sure the bread doesn't get burned in the kitchen, trying to help someone outside find their way in, trying to go back into the living room because she probably only has 3 chairs and there's 70 people, and so where are they gonna sit? Martha's literally physically being pulled in different directions, and so this anxiety is building, but there's this thing that happens in your brain. When we experience emotional distress, it's really hard for us to access the parts of our brain that can logically use reason to figure out what's going on. When you experience deep emotion, it is incredibly difficult to figure out, why do I feel this way and what is happening inside me? And so what Jesus does is he names it. He says, you are experiencing anxiety. You are worrying. And this is not Jesus condemning Martha for feeling this. He doesn't say, wow, you have little faith. You didn't believe I'd provide. No, Jesus doesn't do that. He says, Martha, you're experiencing this. And you may not be able to understand it right now, but this is what's happening inside your brain. And because Jesus names it, because Jesus gives a diagnosis, Martha now understands the next steps that need to be taken. Right? You can only get treatment for a medical issue if you actually have the right diagnosis. And this is what Jesus does. He provides language to what Martha is feeling. It is not a sin to experience emotions. God gave us emotions, and they are good and they are purposeful. And so it is not a sin to experience emotions. Just look at Jesus. When Lazarus died, his friend, Jesus wept. When Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane and he's about to be crucified, he is in so much anguish that he is sweating drops of blood. That's not a sin. That's natural. It is natural for us to feel different things depending on the circumstance that we're in. But what Jesus is calling Martha to see is that we need to be willing to address when those things have gone on for too long and when they've been overboiling and simmering for far too long. And because Jesus names it, Martha can receive help. And the last thing is that Jesus offers whole healing, not just a coping mechanism. Jesus could have told Martha to go for a walk, to take her vitamin D supplement, to take a nap. And though those things may be incredibly helpful, they don't restore. They don't heal, they manage. But Jesus offers whole healing. He offers emotional wholeness. And in Isaiah 9, we read this list of names of who Jesus is and what he's going to do for his people. And one of the names that Isaiah uses is Prince of Peace. Jesus, his name is peace. What he does is bring peace. That's who he is his name. But we often have a plastic Band-Aid version of peace. That's how we understand it. It's something that we just stick on our prayers of God, I have a really busy week. Could you just give me some peace? We think of peace as when chaos and noise stops. As in the problem doesn't actually get solved. I just have to I get to stop hearing it. I get to stop seeing it. That's how we think of peace. But the way that Isaiah uses the word peace is so much different. It's so much deeper. The Hebrew word for this is shalom. And shalom is more than silence or the absence of chaos. Shalom is the act of completely restoring what is broken to make it whole. And to understand this, I want to draw something here. You see, when God created the world, we lived in his shalom. We were with God. We were in the garden with him. And his shalom was there, this healing, this wholeness. There was nothing that we were lacking. But then Adam and Eve, they sinned. And so suddenly our sin, it's not that God's not able to touch sin, it's that we as sinful people cannot encounter a holy God without being put in danger. And so God, out of his love, he sent us here. So bye, Adam and Eve. Peace out. Now we're here. And instead of shalom, we experience the effects of sin. Sin is just not what we do and what's been done to us. The problem of sin is actually every single broken thing in this world. The problem of sin is every single incurable disease, every war, every famine. The problem of sin is that there's rulers and principalities of this earth that they love the fact that their job is to keep us away from here. And so they do everything they can. There are wars that are being waged spiritually in our minds and in our bodies to keep us away from understanding that God is a healer. And so we just stay trapped over here. This is the problem. But Jesus is the Prince of Peace. He is the Prince of Shalom. And so as we live in a world that is fragmented and is distorted and is away from God's wholeness, God sends his Son. And we no longer have that gap. Jesus is the bridge. And so we get to have a way into entering God's shalom. And if we look at Mary in this text, what is she doing? She's sitting at the feet of Jesus. But this isn't the first time that Mary's been sitting at the feet of Jesus. In fact, we read about it for the first time in Luke chapter 7. Mary had actually been called a sinful woman. In Luke chapter 7, we don't see like holy, pious Mary. We see Mary as a prostitute. Like Mary was a prostitute. And she heard Jesus. She had been living in this life of sin, this life of fragmentation. But when she saw Jesus and heard his teaching, she said, I need to change because there is something in me that needs healing. And there's something that I can't do for myself and that the world can't do for me, but I know this guy can. And so she takes this alabaster jar of perfume worth a year's wages, and she cracks it and breaks it and dumps it at the feet of Jesus. And the Pharisees and religious leaders are watching, and they're like, how dare you let a sinful, dirty, disgusting prostitute touch your feet? And you know what Jesus responds? He says, that's not who she is. She's not this. No, she's whole, because I've forgiven her. This is not her name. Her name is Mary. And so when we fast forward to Luke chapter 10, Mary's sitting at the feet of Jesus. Mary, not prostitute, Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus. And what we see is that shalom is this wholeness that Mary has received. Yet we get to this point here where we're like, great, Jesus has died on the cross. He makes me whole. I still have anxiety. Great, I have salvation. I still have depression. I still wake up and I really don't want to be here. I still feel lonely and isolated. So what good is God's shalom if my emotions aren't changing? And I've really wrestled with that this week. What I've learned is that shalom is not a feeling, shalom is a truth. Shalom is not dependent on your circumstances and whether you feel like God's giving you peace and you feel like he's helping you be calm. That's not what shalom is dependent on. Shalom is dependent on this right here, just the cross. And this can't be changed. As those who believe in Jesus and as those who have committed their life and have their faith in him, you have received shalom. You have received the wholeness of God working in you. And what I love about God is that his healing involves the past, the present, and the future. Think of Mary. Jesus forgave everything that she's done. Every wrongdoing, whether it was prostitution or even just like telling a lie, Jesus forgave it. And Mary, she got to live in this present reality that Jesus is with her and Jesus is restoring her. But the best news of all is that we as Christians, we believe that God's not done yet. Actually, because of Christ, the shalom of God is breaking in on this world. That through Mary, she's being transformed by God's Spirit, but even still that God's shalom is breaking out right here and right now. His wholeness is not just something we wait for in eternity, it's something that's completed and fulfilled in eternity, but it's also breaking out right now. And so as we look forward, we remember that when we look at the entire world, there's nothing that sin can do. Everything sits under the feet of Jesus. Everything sits under the shalom of God. There is nothing that Jesus can't heal and can't restore because the shalom of God is true. It is not based on whether or not you feel it. It is based on the fact that if you are in Christ, then Christ is in you, and Christ is making his shalom in you. And so what does it look like for us to be like Mary and to sit at the feet of Jesus? What does it look like? When we wake up tomorrow, when we take our medication, how do we sit at the feet of Jesus? We thank God. We thank God for his advancements. for the ways that he helps us in our symptoms. And we trust that one day God's going to restore all that's broken. So when we still have bad days, we trust that it's one bad day closer to an eternity of only good days. What does it look like when you're in the middle of an exam and you don't know the test question? And you've been studying and you are tired, and that narrative starts to come up to say, you're not a good student. Do you know what's going to happen if you fail this question? You sit in God's shalom, you say, my name is not the amount of questions I failed. My name is the fact that I'm a child of God, that his shalom is here, that he is working in me and making me whole. When you get the job interview and you are so nervous because you really need it, and you're like, I really hope I answer all the questions right. You sit at the feet of Jesus and you abide in Jesus when you just pause and remember that God has provided for you. Everything that you need, he has provided for. And even if it doesn't work out, God's still going to provide for you. When you're trying to give counseling to your friend, when you're trying to give them good advice, but what they're going through is beyond what your words can say, and you seriously have no clue what to say to them, you're going to sit and you're going to rest in the fact that sometimes you don't need to say anything. Because sometimes God's shalom can break through us even in silence. And there are problems and there are things that we can't fix, but there's nothing that God can't fix. Jesus is our Prince of Shalom. He is the Prince of Peace. And we can trust who he is. And so tonight, on your way in, you were able to grab some communion elements. And we're going to have some ushers. If you didn't get one, you can raise your hand. We'll have some ushers make their way to get them to you. But I actually want to invite us to spend just a couple of minutes in silence and in sitting and just holding these elements in our hands. I think a lot of times we run around so fast, we honestly don't even know what's going on in our mind. And so this is just an opportunity for us tonight to just sit and to reflect on where are we at? What's going on in my mind right now? What do I need? And to allow God into that. And I just invite you to hold in your hands the truth, like that bread and the juice. That is the truth that God has sent his son to die for you and to save you. And so I'll give you a couple of minutes and then we'll come back up and we'll take communion together.